Hey everybody, it's PJ from Wisconsin Airgunners. We've got a special test that we're doing tonight. If you've paid attention to social media, one of the big recent releases is the AirVenturi Avenger Bullpup. And if you look at that with a kind of critical eye, you might notice some similarities to another bullpup that's out there. And I'm talking about the Daystate Pulsar. Now, I'm not saying that AirVenturi in any way, shape, or form tried to copy the Daystate rifle. I'm saying that they are similar looking guns. And because I have access to a Daystate Pulsar, we decided it would be worthwhile to do a little bit of a comparison between the two. Now, obviously, they're very different guns. The Daystate Pulsar is electronically controlled and electronically fired. So the valving system isn't a spring-loaded hammer hitting a valve. It's an electronic solenoid opening up and allowing air to come out. And it's also electronically fired, meaning you're not pulling a trigger against a sear, you're more like clicking a mouse. So there's a lot of differences between these two rifles, and really the big question is, how do they shoot? So here's how we're going to test. I'm over here on the western edge of the Wisconsin Airgunners territory. We're at an indoor shop, and honestly we had hoped to be able to film the shooting comparison at a full 30 yards. Unfortunately, the day we have available to do filming, we've got 20 plus mile an hour winds outside. And when we're shooting 177 and 22 caliber pellets, at that wind speed, the weather is going to be more of a factor than the accuracy of the guns. So we're inside at 20 yards. Again, we'd like to stretch it out a little bit further, but you've got to work with what you've got. And we're going to be comparing the 22 caliber AirVenturi Avenger with the 177 caliber Daystate Pulsar. So there are two of us that are going to be doing shooting during the test, and then we'll kind of talk about and sum up our experiences with the rifle. The 177 Daystate is Noah's own rifle. He's had it for, I think, close to 2 years. He's done quite a bit of work on it. It's not exactly standard. I'd say it's enhanced. I've seen him shoot it before. It's a very accurate rifle, and he's very adept at making it hit the target. The Avenger is a little bit newer to me. It's in 22 caliber. It is still running its stock tune. I haven't played with it at all. In the Daystate, we're going to be shooting the JSB, what do we got here? The 10.34 grain pellets. And in the Avenger, we're going to shoot the 18 grain pellets. Other than caliber, though, we're trying to keep the tests as close as possible. And what we're hoping to do is give you guys an idea of the relative accuracy of the two rifles, and then kind of a laundry list of things that we're comparing. And really the question is, can the Avenger keep up, at least at close range? For the shooting test, we're each going to be shooting 6 5-shot groups, a total of 30 rounds. We're each going to shoot both guns, and then in a little bit, we will bring that back as a comparison. We're not going to show you each and every shot. That would make this video longer than it's probably already going to be, and I don't know that it's super exciting. We will show just a little bit of it, probably one from each of us, from each gun. So let's get to that. So for consistency between the two rifles, we are single loading. So we'll be single loading all of the shots for the testing. We will talk later about the magazines for the different rifles, but just to be consistent, we're going to single load. The cocking is really smooth. You don't have to pull the hammer spring back, so really all you're doing is moving the probe out of the way and then probing the pellet forward. There's 2 shots of 5, 2 groups of 5. Well, now we're going to shoot some groups with the Avenger. Reminder, the Avenger's in 22 caliber. It is shooting just as it came from the factory, and yeah, I think that's about it. We're going to shoot 5-shot groups. We're shooting 6 of them, and we will show you a selection of that so as not to make the video too long. I'm going to show you one of the 5-shot groups here. Do you mind
could fix that cheek weld problem. I mean, I've got fantastic groups down there now. I just think that that cheek weld issue, if we could fix that, Jesus, Pete. I mean, it's very, I think it's a very accurate rifle.
So Noah, thanks for opening up the shop for shooting tonight. I know we would have liked to have been outside, but that's Wisconsin in the winter, right?
Yes, it is.
So let's talk about these two rifles, your Daystate and my Avenger Bullpup.
Yeah.
I know there's great things about both rifles. I think there are some obvious comparisons. I remember when you got the Pulsar to begin with, I always think of it as looking like the Nostromo from Aliens.
Yes, it does. Yes, very much so.
And that creates some ergonomic challenges, I think.
It does. That are not apparently obvious when you are staring at it at the store. They only show up once you get home and you're like, oh, okay.
Yeah. So let's talk about the two rifles.
Okay.
When we look at like the size and the weight distribution and balance, what do you think? Is there a clear one stands out over the other to you?
From a size perspective, I like the compactness of the Daystate Pulsar, you know, from a weight balance issue, I feel they're both balanced, right? Just one's longer than the other. I didn't feel like the Avenger was long and unbalanced. I just feel like it's a longer gun that's balanced. This is just a shorter gun that's balanced. I would want to carry this through the woods, but I wouldn't feel like I was, you know, carrying an axe handle if I was carrying the Avenger either.
Right.
So.
And you don't have a moderator on the Pulsar at this point, and
No.
I do have a Sumo, which is a reasonably long
Correct.
Moderator on there, so that adds to them. I know when I look at them side by side, I feel like the Avenger is just a little bit longer, but we're talking about maybe 1 or 2 inches.
Correct.
And especially remember that not only do I have the Sumo on, but I have the Donnie FL extender, which has some merit to it.
Yes.
But that does throw it out about another inch. So you've got about 7 inches of moderator onto the thing, which does take away from some of the compactness.
Yeah, I mean, from the factory, there'd be the length and size would be very, very comparable. You'd be tough pressed to say you couldn't fit one through the door and the other you could.
Right.
So
let's talk a little bit about adjustability. Now, I haven't changed this from the way it came from the factory, but I can change the regulator pressure and I can change the hammer spring tension. What can you change on yours?
well, this is not a factory Daystate Pulsar. There's been a lot of changes to this. The gun control unit has been replaced with an aftermarket Heli-board. And through that, of course, the trigger is the same. And we can, of course, adjust the trigger. It's electronic trigger. It's the Daystate electronic trigger, so we all know the smoothness that comes with that. So that's totally adjustable. I can adjust with the Heli-board. I have a lot more adjustment than I do with the stock Daystate. So
let's talk about the stock Daystate for a minute.
Yeah, stock Daystate, yes.
How many different programs do you get?
You get 3.
Okay, and if you want to change those 3, you need a separate programmer.
You need a separate programmer for it. Yeah.
Have you ever played with that?
No, because it's like, you know, it's a snipe, right? I mean, the idea is you can't find it. Right? I mean, it's out there. You see pictures of it. You see people that supposedly have them, but you can. It doesn't matter what check you want to write. You cannot get your hands on one. And if you do find someone again that has one, the only person who has ever talked in any real detail about it was Steve from AEAC.
Yeah, I thought I saw some stuff from Mike from Airgun Nation as well.
True.
He had gone through, although not necessarily on video, I don't think. I think he did some writing, maybe some forum posts on
Correct.
it. But I do remember something about that. It doesn't seem like it's a particularly simple process.
It is not. It's not a simple process from what I've watched and from what Steve has shown. And so the stock gun, you get 3 settings. I could not make any of those 3 settings work with this setup. Not love it, hate it, whatever. I just couldn't make it work.
So you went to the aftermarket, replaced really the electronic guts of it.
I did. Yep, I went and replaced that, ran that to ground, found the Heli-board, and the idea behind that is you don't need the external programmer. You actually control everything through trigger presses, and that allowed me to get the flexibility that I needed with this gun. You know, you talk about the adjustability you have with that. You're making those adjustments with wrenches. I cannot make those adjustments with this gun until I did the Heli-board. And I think I paid as much for the Heli-board as you paid for your gun.
So you might actually say that the adjustability, despite the electronic nature of that gun, you might actually say the adjustability, the win is over.
I mean, I own this thing, right? I spent a lot of money on this, and as painful as it is to say, from the factory, that is a more adjustable rifle.
All right.
I mean, trigger adjustment is you know, saying that your trigger is adjustable in today's world is like saying you got doors on your car, right? I mean, okay, that everything comes with that. So to me, that's a given.
And that's an electronic trigger. So really what
Yes.
we're doing is we're clicking a mouse.
Correct. Yeah, you're simply and again, you want to, if you're not careful with this, you adjust it too far down and just carrying the gun around at a fire. But
Yeah.
but the fact of it is out of the box, the adjustability in my opinion, goes to the Avenger.
All right, I'm going to take that. Let's talk about build quality for a minute. Compared to the original Avenger, and I own an original, the rifle Avenger, and I have one in 177. I think the build quality on this feels better. It feels more like a grown-up rifle. I know they used a different material. It is not that. That's a beautifully made rifle. The fit and finish is exactly what you'd expect when you spend that kind of money for something. I will say that this is a significant upgrade to the original. And you fired my Avenger.
I've shot your Avenger, and I've made recommendations for the Avenger for other air rifle enthusiasts, and they've purchased it and they've been very happy with it. The stock on the original Avenger has always been just an absolute rub, right? People get it, you know, and it's like, wow, if they could just fix the stock. In my opinion, I don't know what they do. I'm not a polymer engineer or whatever, but they've done something with this stock that certainly makes it feel all grown up. And it's night and day, right? I wish you could buy that kind of stock for the original Avenger. And
Yeah.
even if they said
The
they
wood,
would,
they do have the wood stock version.
yeah, I feel that's a little. I think that's a little clunky,
Okay.
you know. But if they took the original Avenger and said, hey, you can upcharge it $50 and you get this grown-up stock type of stock, I would, yeah.
Okay. Now, they have some similar features, right? They both have the pick rail
Yep.
underneath. This does have the additional pick rail left and right.
Yep.
I do some stuff in barns where I want to have an auxiliary light on there, so I can see where that is useful. I think some people look at that and they're like, what would you ever do with it? But I do fit a light onto the sides every once in a while. Your butt pad goes up and down and then cants left and right, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, both of these. This part here goes this direction, and this part goes up and down. So you get a little flexibility. This here only slides back and forth. This has no vertical adjustment whatsoever. So you better be in love with this kind of height, or you're going to be investigating a lot of different scope heights.
Right. And on the Avenger, you have a butt pad that moves up and down. This one has 5 different spots.
Yep.
And then you have up and down and back and forward on the cheek piece. Now, I think both of us believe that cheek piece could be a little bit less hump design. Maybe something with a little more of a wave left to right might be just a little bit better. I'd like to be able to get down just a little bit lower.
I would too. I found the cheek weld on that. I'll say this, I found the cheek weld very difficult on that rifle, but given that, and you'll show the groupings later, I found the gun capable of shooting amazing groups with one of the most important pieces struggling with. And again, you know, that's a toolless design that you can adjust that. This is not toolless at all, right? You need a certain size Allen wrench for these up here. And then this is what I call a two-stage adjustment, in the fact that you have to remove this part of the buttstock to get this part completely loose. Then you have to reassemble this part. And so it's not only not toolless, it's also a multi-stage situation. You almost need two people to do this, where you're holding the gun and you've got somebody, like, you know, running the wrenches for you. And so that's a downside, although I was able to marry to this gun, you know, weld to this gun a whole lot better. To me, you know, you need one of your fellow airgun enthusiasts with a 3D printer, and we all know who that possibly could be.
So you're saying I'm going to leave this here for a couple of weeks?
You leave it here for a couple of weeks and
come back, and there'll be a different cheek piece.
There'll be a different cheek piece on there, and I honestly think if you designed that, just a little bit of tweaking on that, and if you had a left or right selection, that'd be a very comfortable gun to shoot. I mean, there's something wrong there, right? It's like, but even with that said, it's an amazingly accurate rifle.
Let's talk about magazines for a minute. We did single loading tonight, which we'd made a decision to do single loading.
Correct.
The Avenger magazine, I think a number of other guns in the industry use a similar magazine. The loading, some people think it's awful and futzy, and some people are like, well, you know, it's a magazine, that's what you have to do, but you spin the cover, you put one in, you know, you flip it over, and then you put the rest of them in. What I will say about that magazine design is they're cheap.
Yep.
The gun ships with 2 of them. I didn't mention this to you before, but if you notice, there's actually cutouts underneath the stock, so you can put spare magazines in there, which I think is a plus. Let's talk about the Daystate magazines.
Yeah, so the Daystate magazines, it comes with one. They're extremely expensive. Now this one, I have what I call the classic Daystate magazine. This doesn't have the little magnetic flip cover and loading. I think the Daystate magazines are easy to use, but again, I mean, shooting black powder rifles and stuff, to me, loading magazines is, I don't lose a lot of sleep on it, because it's like, you know, how about throwing some powder and ball down a barrel, you know, so.
Shoot 500 rounds of Glock and keep one of those magazines fed.
Yeah, exactly.
Your thumbs are bleeding. It's all pretty relative.
But the one thing, I guess, that for me with the Daystate magazines is, one, they're just extremely expensive. I mean, you're going to spend well over $100 for a magazine. One of the things, and you just won't see this a lot. You certainly wouldn't see it in a bench rest competition. But one of the problems that you run into with the Daystate magazine in the 177 is, because the magazine is so deep, the pellet sometimes can fall backwards. When you and I were out shooting at the farm, if I walked around and wasn't careful and tried to cock the gun when the gun was in this status, right, the pellet would actually slide around in the magazine and could jam itself. More than once, you were taking shots while I was over to the side trying to dig out a mashed pellet. But it's not something a lot of people talk about. You have to do a lot of shooting to experience it. This right here, this 177 tray, is one that was 3D printed. And the reason that I printed this is the tray that comes with the Daystate Pulsar. It's an exceptional tray. It's magnetic. The problem with it is it's so good that when you put it in there and it snaps down, you have to get a knife or some kind of razor blade to wedge in here to pop it up. You know, I'm not a big fingernail person, so I end up sitting there, can't get the single tray out, so I designed and printed my own, which works fine. The Daystates are notoriously known to be more accurate when shooting single shot versus magazine. And you know, most people will say if you want to get the most out of your Daystate, you're going to shoot single shot. I would say that single shot to single shot, I found the feeding to be very simple on that there. Just as simple as on this here, but
And that lever is a little bit smoother
yeah, I mean,
because it's not actually pulling anything back. Like its only
Correct.
responsibility is to get out of the way so a new pellet can get in and then feed that pellet forward.
correct.
Where this is actually pulling back the hammer, pulling back the spring, really setting up for the next shot. Like this isn't just probing a
Correct.
pellet home, it's actually doing some functional work to make the gun go.
Yeah, it's doing some heavy lifting in there, and
But I found it decent. Like
I
it's
wasn't
not the
just-
smoothest gun I've ever fired from a cocking standpoint, but I don't find it unpleasant.
I did not find it distracting, right? And I guess that's the thing is I didn't find myself focusing on that part of the experience. Again, both of these guns both suffer, in my opinion, from one of the same problems with this cocking lever. Is the cocking lever is so far as a right-handed shooter, in order to cock this, I have to break the most important, in my opinion, one of the most important contact points, and that's my pistol and trigger finger. I have to break that, come back here, and cock this. I have to do the same thing on that there. That is something that, in my world, you have participated at Rocky Mountain Airgun Challenge several times. I did it in 2019. This is not a speed gun, and that becomes a disappointment for someone like me who has such a love affair with Daystates and wanted to be able to compete with a speed gun like this. I found out very quickly that location of that hammer and this hammer would there's just too much time lost there, and
Right.
so it may not matter to some people if you're carrying this thing around the woods for 20 minutes at a time, shooting squirrels. Yeah, you're going to be like, I don't know what he's talking about. But
And I noticed when we were single loading, it really didn't matter all that much because we were breaking cheek weld
Correct.
and we were coming off the gun anyway to put the next
yeah,
pellet in. If you were trying to shoot from a magazine, you are kind of reaching back really about to where your ear is, if not just a little bit beyond. So I find myself coming forward generally
yeah.
to cock the rifle.
But magazine to magazine, like you said before, though, this comes with one. If you want two, you're going to be dropping another $100
Right.
into that date.
And if we talk about price, this is MSRP in that $400 range.
Yep.
What's a Pulsar go for?
Well, they're no longer made, or at least they're end of life, as they say. You're going to drop between $1,600 and $1,800 for a factory Pulsar. That's without the Heli-board or any other goodies. And so, yeah, you're talking a lot, big difference.
Right. Yeah, like 4 times.
4 times,
Yeah.
right? Yeah.
Noise. What did you think?
I think they're both the same. This one has an internal baffle system. Daystate Pulsars are known to be very quiet with this whole system like this.
And fairness, when we're comparing, you're shooting 177, I'm shooting 22.
Yeah, huge. Yeah, I think Apple's,
Similar velocities,
similar velocities.
just different projectiles and different calibers, obviously.
Yeah, I think with the Sumo on the end of this, it is indoor friendly, right? We were shooting inside the shop here. We certainly weren't. I mean, the pellet hitting the metal was more of the noise. That's what the neighbors are going to hear in both of these guns.
Yep. Yeah, and I probably wouldn't shoot this a lot indoors without some kind of moderator. But again, it's 22, not 177.
And I can tell you, if you take the baffles out of the end of this shroud, I mean, it's going to make enough of a bark you wouldn't want to keep doing it either.
Right. And this does, stock from the factory, have a baffle section in
Oh, does it? Okay.
Yeah,
I did
so
not
it is
know that.
baffled. They do something. I've always switched them over this way. So
How far does the barrel come up? Do you know?
It's actually kind of recessed. I would put it about in this area. And if you look at the way Donnie built this adapter, it actually has a barrel centering tool, whatever. It doesn't just end here with the threads. There's actually a tube that comes back about that far and goes over the end of the barrel to try and keep everything lined up and centered.
Okay.
Every once in a while, well, for anybody who doesn't know, these rifles that are made for a particular price point, there are some things that have to give when you say we want to build this, we want to be able to make this much profit on it when we sell it, this much when we sell it to a dealer, this is how much we want to sell it for, and you can't have everything for no money. So every once in a while, I think the quality control has that barrel a little bit out of center. I don't think it happens all that often, but this certainly helps if you were worried about any kind of this weight pressing down or something like that. But I thought in here, like you did with both guns, the pellet hitting the trap was far and away the loudest noise
absolutely
that we heard. We talked a little bit about the trigger, yours being electronic. This trigger gets the job done.
It gets the job. I'll say this: that trigger.
It's not a match grade.
It's not a match grade trigger, but I got to admit, after 25, 30 shots, it has a unique feel that I again did not find distracting. It has. I think you described it well. It rolls. Once I experienced it, and then you explained it, and I took some time to get used to it. I got to be honest. I mean, I like this match grade trigger, right? I would go for this. But I've shot more expensive rifles that had gritty triggers. This is not a gritty trigger.
Yeah.
Right. Gritty triggers I can't deal with. Right.
Yep.
I cannot deal with keep wondering if somebody drug it through the sand on the way here. Mm-hmm. What I can deal with is it just rolled and it there's no break. It always fired at the same spot. And I think I think people need to understand when they see the groups. This is the first time I got to shoot this rifle, right? I have lived on this rifle, right? Right. This rifle is a member of the family. But the fact of it is I had a hard time with the cheek weld. I had to get used to the trigger, and people can make their own choices, right? The internet will judge our shots like they always do, right? And but again, I also found here's one of the challenges that can happen with a trigger like this. You make this recommendation to a new airgun enthusiast, right? Who is not going to drop thousands of dollars to start with. They need to, they grab a gun, and if they have these hair triggers, they're going off right. It could actually kind of scare them away from the sport. That trigger is, I don't know. I actually didn't hate it.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it gets the job done. I agree that it rolls smoothly.
It does. It rolls consistently.
Yep. So what did you think accuracy-wise? Now we didn't have the conditions we wanted. We wanted to be able to push the targets out a little bit farther, shoot from inside to outside. It wouldn't have been a valid comparison with 20 to 25 mile an hour winds that are shaking the roof as we're sitting inside.
Correct.
Right? So we're limited to a 20-yard range, which isn't long by anybody's estimation. Here's the targets. I'll look at them and we'll put them up for people to see. There's your Daystate target. There's mine. There is my Avenger target, and I'll go get yours.
The challenge comes down to this is again, right, to be fair, these were really these 30 rounds, right, there's 5 per shot, and I shot, these 35 rounds were the first 35 rounds I got to shoot out of this gun. These rounds out of the Daystate Pulsar probably really are, honestly, rounds 10,000 through 10,000 and
10,000 and 30?
and 30, yeah. And I don't say this lightly. Is I would say, while there are a couple nice groups in here with the Daystate, it's hard for the words to come out. But I'd have to say that knowing what I know, there are some great groups here.
Yeah.
And I know the problems that I had to get used to. That cheek weld was a real challenge for me. Also, too, I mean, this is a situation where, you know, that's your scope. This is my scope. Our vision is entirely different,
Yeah.
right?
Mm-hmm.
I did not adjust your scope. I shot it with your vision settings.
I shot with yours.
Yep. And so I have to honestly say that as it sits right here, straight comparison, I believe the Avenger did better. Yeah, it did better. Actually, it's this is one of those things where you always wonder, you know, if the car never starts, why do you love it so much, right? So the fact of it is, it did really well. I mean, there's a hole. I mean, it's a 22 caliber hole, right? And there's a 22 caliber hole. And there's just a slight little deviation there. There's far more better groups here. Yeah, and I struggled with them. Okay, what about you?
I'm looking at my targets. I would say the best group I shot, and said this before, we're shooting 177 versus 22. So I'll do some analysis on these targets, at least best and worst. But I would say my best group with the Avenger is probably on par with my best group from the Pulsar. I do agree that if we can make a modification of that cheek weld, it'll be a little bit easier to get a consistent sight picture down there. I think you could also do it by bringing up the mounts, but the way it's mounted, we've got the Picatinny rail here and the dovetail over there. Your mounts are higher, your rail is lower, and we'd have to measure to see. Well, but your cheek piece, where it is sitting lower to the bore than mine is.
Correct. Well, and to be fair, right, we'd have to get the measuring, you have to get the scale out and look at it and measure it. But to be honest, right, one of the things you do have to get used to when it comes to these two bullpups is you've got to get used to some very tall. Right. There is a lot of inches between your scope and the center line of that barrel.
And all of a sudden, things like rifle cant matter a ton.
Oh my goodness,
a ton
matter. They matter crazy.
Yeah.
My personal opinion is that's the whole reason that Daystate put the laser on the front of the Pulsar.
So that you would know whether you're
correct.
And you have.
I have a bubble back here.
Level back there. That's factory.
Yep.
Right. That comes with the gun.
But I used to think that the laser was like, hey, you set that for 25 yards, so you can do your thing. But the reality is when you put this into some experienced shooters' hands, which we have some around here that shoot like the 6.5 Creedmoor long distance, because there's a 1,000-yard range just 20 miles away. When you put this in I put this in some of their hands, they all come back and say, you almost need a laser on this so that you could tell whether or not you're canting. And I'm like, well, it actually comes with one on the front. And they're like, yeah, that's not for 20-yard shooting. That is, you need that's so you know whether or not you're canting one way or the other. And once they showed me that, I was like, oh, they're right.
Yeah.
But you're right. But you have to get used to that, right? That suddenly is like, oh my,
And I think that's the case for most bullpups.
Yes.
I shoot the impact a lot.
Yeah.
It doesn't look as high, but it's high.
But it's high.
That's just the nature.
Does this come with a case?
No, comes with a box.
Well, to be fair, this comes with a case as well that the gun does not fit in with the scope.
Okay.
So you have a box.
So you have a box.
That's one of those little things.
Because I could cut the cardboard on my box and it would fit the scope in there. I could reconfigure the cardboard.
That was one of those things where it's like, man, that's a sexy little case, you know, and you get it home and you put the scope on it, and then you get to put it back in. You're like, that doesn't fit in the case anymore. And you sit there and you're like, okay, I guess that's a reality. But so yeah, it again, $400, best price $16. And when you introduce people to air rifles, right, accuracy matters, right? When they're moving up from a Daisy 880 or a Crossman 1100, and they're spending this, be able to give them the ability to shoot these kinds of groups straight out of the box. Yeah, that's pretty impressive.
Yeah. Yeah, I've been, in, you know, the couple of months I've had it, been impressed by it, and that's why I wanted to come over and kind of see if, I guess I'd look at it this way. Do you think it can hang?
Oh yeah. I always ask myself, because we've been to competitions together and we compete and everything, I always ask myself, when I see someone pull a rifle out of the case, and I know the rifle, am I worried? You know, if you and I sat down and we were outside and you're like, hey, this is a 50-yard competition and there's $1,000 riding on it, and you pulled that out, I would be like, I've got some work to do, right? You know, fun and games are over with, right? Yeah. And not every rifle's that way, but in this case, yeah, that's one of those things where someone could underestimate that, right? It's like one of those sleeper cars that you pull up next to and you've got your, you know, $105,000 BMW, and you're thinking, yeah, that guy, there's no way he can touch me, and all of a sudden,
Dodge Dart.
It's a Dodge Dart. I mean, what can you do? I mean, how fast can you go? And next thing you know, you're just staring at taillights. But that's a sleeper gun. And I'd be curious to see it reach out, you know, just how far could you go? I mean, 22 caliber to 22 caliber, that kind of thing.
Yeah, and I've shot it at 55 and 65 yards and found the accuracy to be, you know, good.
Well, also one thing I found too is you shot it how many times? What, 35, 40? Because we all, you know, there was some playing around with it. So let's say you shot it 50 times and then I shot it my 35 times. We did not have to refill that.
No.
I mean, you expect a lot of shots out of a 177, right? To get 500 shots out of this tank of air that'd be common. But
it's still above reg pressure. If we were going to shoot another round, I would air it up. But the upside of, and I know it looks like we're pointing guns at each other's faces. It's the angle of the camera, but
well, we're also professionals, ain't like we're gonna.
It's a 300 bar fill. That's a 250 bar fill. Not
Correct.
that that's, you know, bad or anything. 250 bar fill is a good fill, but it does allow it to make really good use of a limited amount of air because you know you got more pressure. So it's and there are different ways to tune this too. Like I said, I'm operating in the factory tune yet, and I may leave it that way or I may play with it. I don't know. It's accessible and you can do it. I guess that's the big thing.
Well, I know, but I guess my question would be is what I've got one hole, tiny bit bigger than one hole. What are you trying to achieve? Less than one hole?
Right.
I mean, you can only shove that pellet through
I've
there
got,
a certain way.
I've got two where there's just the thinnest amount of paper, you know, with one hole and then one that was just a little bit off to the side. And I did that once, maybe twice with the Pulsar. Like I said, I'll have to do some analysis. When I look at those two groups side by side, those are, you know, pretty.
Well, and
pretty
everybody, I mean, we're professional enough to know that we're talking about center to center dimensions here. Both of us can look at that and say we know what we're looking at here. But yeah,
so I'll have to do some analysis, and I'll put that up for people to see. Well, no, I want to thank you for having me over. It's always great.
I'm glad
to
you
get
brought it
together.
over. Thanks for coming over. It's always nice to have you come over and visit us on the west side.
Yeah.
You know, so it's always cool, man.
Thanks. Folks,
Thank you.
until the next video, shoot safe, shoot straight, and we'll see you around.
Yeah, man, I did not expect it to shoot that well.